Deputy Conway-Walsh.
Minister, too many apprentices have been failed throughout the pandemic. They were unable to access the off-site training they needed to complete or advance their apprenticeships and become qualified tradespeople that we sorely need. It's truly alarming that there's been a 17% increase in apprentices waiting to access off-the-job training over the past 2 months, with figures back up to just under 10,000. This is half of all craft apprentices. What has caused this, and what steps are being taken to address it?
Thank the Deputy for her question. The backlog in apprenticeship training referred to in the Deputy's question results from the adverse impact of COVID public health restrictions on the operation of the education and training sector. In responding to these restrictions, it has been a priority to seek to facilitate, wherever possible, access to on-site teaching and learning for essential skills-based activities such as apprenticeship. However, the Deputy will appreciate that education and training providers have been closed for extended periods since March 2020 on public health grounds, and during periods apprenticeship classes were permitted, they were running at half capacity under social distancing measures. A detailed and comprehensive emergency plan to tackle apprenticeship waiting lists has been underway across further education training since August of 2021, with some training facilities started to reopen. At that point, 11,859 apprentices were delayed in their training. Since then, a €20 million additional capital investment has provided a large increase in workshops and equipment in every training location in the country. A further €17 million was provided under Budget 2022 to further facilitate Solace and the HEA's response, including a significant recruitment campaign to increase the number of trainers. By the end of January, almost 7,000, or 60% of those on the July 2021 waiting list, were back in training or had completed their phase of training and were progressing in their apprenticeship. The number waiting at the end of January 2022 was 9,570, reflecting the rapid growth in registrations during 2021 and to date in 2022. Craft apprenticeships are demand-led, with no restrictions on registrations in any single year. The current apprentice population of over 24,000 is the highest since it has been since 2009. Apprenticeship registrations in 2021 were the highest they have been since 2007, with 8,607 apprentices employed on 62 apprenticeship programmes. 6,955 registrations were in craft apprenticeship programmes, with over 60% of these in electrical, plumbing, carpentry and joinery crafts. Just to conclude, my department, Solace, and other apprenticeship partners are actively working on additional measures to ensure that the waiting list is removed as speedily as possible, enabling apprentices to progress through their apprenticeship as quickly as is feasible. By the end of the year, the vast majority of apprentices awaiting for Phase 2 placement will have started this training. By the start of April, the backlogs for Phases 4 and 6 will be cleared.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. It's just in terms of the phases. So at Phase 6, this is in September, at Phase 6 we had 1,000, in Phase 4 we had 2,000, but the vast majority were in Phase 2, and that was 7,000 at that time. So I think in one sense, when you give the figures and you say that 4 and 6 will be cleared by April, obviously I welcome that, but the vast majority are in Phase 2. And I just think we need to be careful of that. It's positive that apprenticeship registrations are up, but this is of course to be welcomed. But be careful of what you take credit for, because unless you want to accept the blame for the collapse of registration numbers in the past, craft apprenticeship registrations reflect demand in the construction sector, but you can't explain why 10,000 were unable to access the off-the-job education component, because the target was surpassed by 300. This has happened months after we've been taken back at full capacity. How can we have insufficient capacity when you spend the last year and a half to tell us you're ramping up capacity to deal with the backlog? Things don't just add up. The true figure is really even higher as your department removes apprentices from the waiting list when they get the start date for the training, not when they actually start.
Minister.
Thanks, Deputy. I outlined to you in the initial reply, significant money has been applied to this issue, and I think you've acknowledged that. In total, across last year, and this year an amount of 37 million euros will be available to address this issue in particular. It also includes a change in the structures of Phase 2 off-the-job training, which will facilitate a third intake of apprentices per annum and an opt-in rapid employer assessment, which is being piloted at Phase 7 in relation to on-the-job for those apprentices who have completed Phase 6 and who have spent more time than 4 years in their apprenticeship scheme. You're aware of the apprenticeship incentivisation scheme and the impact that that has had, and I spoke in relation to the increase in the registrations. We brought in that scheme, as you know, particularly during COVID. It was extended and it played a vital role in terms of ramping up the numbers of people who came in at a period when there were other demands in our sector.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Minister, there are over 500 less apprentices who became qualified tradespeople in 2021 than in 2020, despite the reopening in September. And I want to know, when will the waiting lists be cleared? When will the apprentices be able to complete the training in the allocated 4 years like every other student? The people with the skills we need to meet housing and the retrofit targets need to be valued, and the system that trains them needs to be functioning properly. Instead, your department, over 2020 and 2021, you saved more money due to the waiting list than is spent on to address the backlog. The state saved over 55 million, mostly from apprentice allowances, and you only reinvested back 37 million. You've left almost £1 billion sitting unused in the National Training Fund. To make matters worse, in a written response to me, you actually used the backlog as a justification for your plans to reform the apprenticeship model, and reforms previously described by the Connect trade union as essentially privatisation of the service. So the question would be, are you allowing the system to collapse so that you can justify dismantling the craft apprenticeship model?
With respect, Deputy, that's total nonsense to try and present a scenario that we're trying to accrue savings, not invest in apprenticeships, or not reform the whole space. You know that that's simply not the case. We have 62 apprenticeships up and running, as you know. We have another about 20 in development and about another 15 expressions of interest. We have the action plan, which was launched and has a number of key targets in relation to diversity, equality, set up the National Apprenticeship Office. We've resourced that, the stakeholder alliance, which will support that. There is a lot happening in this space, as you well know. We're moving into complete new areas, unprecedented, the areas that we're moving into. And your presentation is that the house is falling down, and I just simply can't agree with you. So it was a statement rather than a question, and that's my reply to you, Deputy.
Thank you.